Hi, Grace. Hi, Seema.
Hi, Rabbi. How are you? Sorry, I was muted.
No worries.
Wondering why you weren't answering.
No, I figured. I think they say the most common phrase in 2020 or 2021 is you're muted.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
But Rabbi, I think they have to change that. Hi, Dan. They have to change that 2020 vision. It wasn't much of a vision last year.
Yeah.
I see Seema is there.
Yeah, I think she just walked away for a minute, but she's going to come back.
Dan, did you see the ad in the website?
Yep.
Good.
בסדר גמור. Okay.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Sam. Hi, Shmuel.
Hi, Robert.
Seema,
Hi, Seema. Good to see
Seema,
you.
מה שלומך? He muted. Seema, you have to unmute yourself.
Can wait 1 minute for people to come in.
Rabbi,
Yes, Sam.
did you make noise?
For sure.
Good. Thank you.
A request is a request.
So what is the topic?
Okay, today's topic is this week's parsha,
Beshalach.
Beshalach. Hi, Dan.
Bye-bye. Shalom, shalom, everyone.
Shalom, shalom. Okay, I think we're going to start. Okay, today's parasha, Parashat Beshalach, a fascinating parasha, like all the parashot we've been seeing till now. But they just are all fascinating. Each one's got an incredible spin of events which happened, which we have to learn from. So much to elaborate on, and so much to look at. But just where we left off, okay, so we're going to begin the Pesukim from the beginning. So as I mentioned, to get the maximum out of this class, best to have a Chumash with Rashi in front of you, if possible. Excellent. Okay. So we are starting Parashat Beshalach, and Beshalach is really a continuation of the Hi Ellen. I don't know if you can hear me yet. And hi Josh. Hi Ellen. Hi Josh. We are starting Parashat Beshalach, which is really the continuation, as well as the culmination of the Exodus. That means the Jewish people were let out last week. Paro decided to give them off. He said, okay, he lets them out. They go out. We said last week, if you do the math, approximately between, Pasuk says, around 600,000 men between the age of 20 and 60, levad mitaf, besides the women and children. If you do the math, we're talking about approximately 2 to 3 million people who left Egypt. This nation are now driving out, literally with donkeys laden with gold and silver, which they borrowed, spoke about last week, from the Egyptians, and they're on their way out. So the Pasuk kind of recaps this last incident. Vayhi b'shalach paro et ha'am. So the Pasuk in this week's parasha begins. Perek Yud Gimel, chapter 13, Pasuk 17. It happened when Pharaoh sent the people, V'lo nacham Elohim derech eretz Pelishtim ki karovu. And God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, because it was near. Before we actually begin the crunch of the Pasuk, I should mention tonight is Tisha B'Av. Hi, Betty. Tonight is Tisha B'Av. Is Tu B'Shvat. And Tu B'Shvat is one of those very special days which some celebrate more, some celebrate less. But Tu B'Shvat is really a beautiful idea, has many different aspects to it. One of them, which is slightly connected to this week's parasha. In this week's parasha, we have the story of the manna, of the man. And part of the complaint of the man was, however incredible what it was, the man was actually colorless, or white, if you want, not with any flavors of any special colors. And the Midrash says that you could feel whatever flavor you want, right? You want to taste ice cream, you can taste ice cream. You want to taste some steak, you can taste some steak. If you're vegetarian, you want to taste some fresh salad, you can taste some fresh salad. But that was the beauty of the man, that even though it was just white, nevertheless it had incredible taste. However, after not so long, the Jewish people got fed up again and they wanted real food. But that is, I think, related to Tu B'Shvat with regards to the fact that Tu B'Shvat is 24 hours, where we look at the fruits, and as we say in Birkat HaMazon, God bestowed upon us a world, a creation, with creations that are so beautiful. B'chen, b'chesed, u'v'rachamim. God gave us such beautiful fruit. And we have 24 hours to kind of figure out the beautiful things that Hashem gave us in our lives. And I think that it's really an appropriate idea or message, if you want, from Tu B'Shvat, that really we don't often think about the beautiful things that we have. But look at, something as simple as an apple. I think one of the beautiful things of COVID, with all the negative it's brought, there's been certain silver linings which we've had. And one of those things is for us to appreciate the little things in life. And the things that we didn't have time to appreciate because we were so on the go, God has kind of slowed us down. So just appreciate the minimal things in our lives. And you take an apple, for example. An apple, you have different colors, variations of apples, different types of tastes within the variations of apples. You have the skin of the apple, the peel of the apple, which is a harder skin. And you have the actual texture of the inner part of the apple, which is some crunchier, some less crunchy. An incredible thing. You have the seeds within the apple, which one little tiny seed can build such a beautiful tree, can grow from that. It's incredible. And when you look at the different types of things and you suddenly realize we've got so much beauty in this world, Hashem could have easily given it to us like he gave us the man. The man was white. It was plain, it was simple, it was great. You can taste whatever you want, but it was simple. And that's why the Jews got fed up, because the mere visual element of food has a major impact on how we view the food. So Tu B'Shvat is really that time. We contrast the man in this week's parasha, and we say to ourselves, 24 hours we have to bless and appreciate the beautiful fruits we have in the fruits of the world and essentially all creation, but with a specific emphasis on fruits of the trees, on Tu B'Shvat. I think that's a very powerful lesson. I think when we thank Hashem for the chen and the chesed and the rachamim, which we pray for in Birkat HaMazon, then when an astronaut goes to space, he doesn't take a bag of sandwiches with him, right? He gets these pills, whatever it is, and you have all the nutrients and all the things. Who wants to be eating pills? So that's what we have. Hashem gave us such package so beautifully, we can enjoy it. So that's a really impactful thing. The same thing when we say a bracha, when we say a blessing, then we say, Baruch Ata Hashem, Borei Pri Ha'etz. He who created fruits of the tree. Borei Pri Ha'adama. He who created the fruits of the land. And if we learn to have gratitude for those little things, for those little differences, the orange and the pineapple and the long stalks and the thin ones and the big ones and the small ones and the grapes and more seeds and less seeds and the dates and the pomegranate, And there's so many beautiful things. That is, we say the bracha, Baruch Ata Hashem, just appreciate, thank you, God, for the little things in my life. And Bezrat Hashem will be able to have a greater life in general. Yeah.
Rabbi, I just read that the Tu B'Shvat is mentioned first in the Mishnah. It's not from the Tanakh, or not from the Bible. But think about the fact that 2,000 years ago, there was one religion that thought about the environment.
Yes.
Ahead of so many people, so many other religions and cultures, to plant a tree, not because of the fruit. Think about the atmosphere. And I mean, it's unbelievable. It just shows you how wise Judaism.
Very well pointed out.
You know,
100%.
an amazing holiday.
Yeah, and I remember I was speaking when she mentioned Diane Benarosh, Aleh Shalom, passed away. She said, when you look at a tree, you look at an apple. You don't just look at the apple. You look at the leaf. You look at the stalk. And like Eyal says, the oxygen, the carbon dioxide, which the trees help with, and the environment. And Vancouver's got such clean air because of the trees and the greenery that we have. We didn't have that in Gibraltar. In London, you go to a rural city, you don't have that. But it's beautiful. And we have to appreciate every element of it. How one little tiny seed can create a huge apple tree. It's powerful. But it's the little things in life which you have to appreciate. Dan.
And there is a case, in fact, to comment on what Ayel said, we have a commandment that when we're at war, if we have to build ramparts, we're not allowed to take down the trees. We have to recognize and honor them and lead them. And we can use other trees, in fact, to build the armaments that we may need.
100%. Well done. Well said, Dan. There's an Isur D'Oraita, a biblical prohibition to cut down a fruit tree. Isn't that incredible?
And what's the first thing that we're doing when we having the state of Israel? We're planting millions of trees.
Right, KKL.
And the
truth is, the very first parasha, Parashat Bereshit, talks about Adam Arishon, who is told to look after the garden. Right? Yeah. We're way back. We're way back and way ahead. Okay, let's move on with this parasha. I just want to mention that because of Tu B'Shvat. If we have time, I'll mention something very brief with regards to the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is today.
Today, yeah.
So, Vahi b'shalach paroi ta'am. We got Parashat b'shalach. Just a very quick recap of the parasha in general. What is the parasha? We've just come out of Egypt. We're moving on. The Hebrews are going out just gone out of Egypt, and suddenly they've gone on a bit of a roundabout way. We'll get into that in a minute. And the Paro gets wind of the fact that these Jews, they're not coming back. And he goes and entraps them. And eventually they start crying out to Moshe. Moshe says, in the name of God, just go and straight into the sea. They go into the sea, and miracle of miracles, they have essentially the epitome of all the miracles of Egypt comes out, and the sea splits, and they go through dry land. The Egyptians go and run after them, and as they're coming in, and they're going, the Hebrews are going through, Egyptians are coming round, and the sea goes back on them, and they get their just punishment. Midrash is brought down that every Mitzri, every Egyptian, whatever he did to a Jew, so if he kicked a Jew with his foot, so the waves would come with him as a foot, from to his leg, and so on and so forth. The hand, and they got what they deserved. And then the Jews sang very famous, as Yashir we say every day, famous Shira. In the Torah, it's very beautifully written. If you look at it, the only place in the Torah which is similar to Hazinu, but it's the only Shira which is written in Torah in a very specific format. Looks a bit like a poem, Dan, for you. Looks like a poem where you got a few word spaces, very interesting how it's written, all very, very specific. And they say this beautiful Shira. We won't have time to go through that. Then Miriam picks up her tambourine and sings with all the women. Their appreciation, very interesting to note the differences between the appreciation of song from the women to the perception of the men. Very, very interesting. Then they had this problem where there was no water. Moshe goes and throws in a certain tree and sweetens the water. And then comes to the 15th of Iyar. This is already a month after they've come out. When they come out of Egypt, 15th of Nisan, that was Pesach. 15th of Iyar, their water supply and then their food supply runs out. And they start complaining about food. And that's when the manna gets promised to them and gets sent down. And the Torah elaborates a lot about the manna to give us also a appreciation that the Jews can go through anything. If one has faith, a person can go through the wilderness with 3 million people, men, women, children. We're going to do the sandwiches. No sandwiches, nothing left. But if you have faith, Kadosh Baruch Hu will provide for you. In fact, the manna was kept ledorot for generations and kept in the Kodesh Kodashim in a small jar to remind the Jews that parnasah is from Shamayim. You want sustenance? You can get it from God. You can do and do and do and do and toil, and nothing can come out of it. A person can have no blessing. Or a person can do his hishtadlut, what he's supposed to do, and do avodat Hashem, what he's supposed to do in equal. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will provide, like HaKadosh Baruch Hu provided the man. Dan.
A couple points. I mean, just to go back a bit, one thing that bothers me, it doesn't seem to bother Rashi, but just before, as they leave, they take Joseph's bones. Okay, but what about the other brothers? Are they not significant? Does it not matter that they have to worry about maybe taking their bones out for proper burial outside of Egypt?
So that's a very good question. And you know who it bothers?
I don't know.
Rashi.
Well, so why were we not discussing?
You clearly didn't see the Rashi. Rashi actually quotes a midrash, and he puts it from the wording of the pasuk that not only was it the bones of Yosef, but the bones of all the brothers went together, and they went to the land of Israel. The reason why it was specified as the bones of Yosef was because that was what he requested, and Moshe took it out.
What was it not requested? Sorry, I missed that.
Yosef requested,
yes,
that when they go out of Egypt,
yes, they take his bones.
His bones should be taken out. And maybe we'll elaborate on that Rashi very.
Okay, but the midrash Rashi's midrash says that they took the rest of the brothers' bones as well.
Yeah, if you want to quickly have a look at the Rashi, quote you the Rashi. If you look at
one other point, Rabbi, I wanted to make as much as this is one thing that really bothers me about Rashi. When we talk about the children of Israel leaving Egypt, according to Rashi, only 20%, 1/5.
Wait, we'll get there. We haven't got there. We'll get there. We'll get there in a minute. We mentioned it last week, but we'll get there when I come to you.
Okay.
Yeah, good point. If you want to look at Rashi in Perek Yud Gimel, chapter 13, pasuk 19.
Give me a second.
Rashi says, "V'ha'alitem et atzmotai mizeh itechem." You should bring my bones up from here with you.
Yeah.
Says Rashi, "Le'echav hishbi'a ken." He made his brothers take this oath. Lamanu she'af atzmot kol hashevatim he'elu imahem, says Rashi. This teaches us that the children of Israel also brought the bones of all the tribes, I mean the sons of Jacob, up from Egypt with them. Shneimar itechem, as it says, with you. Yosef asked the brothers, "Bring up my bones with you." Who's he talking to? To the brothers.
Yeah.
Says the Rashi. From here we learn that actually all the bones are brought up. In fact, there's a very famous Gemara in a passage in the Talmud. I think it's in the Gemara in Makot, if I remember correctly, about Yehuda's bones were still rattling. A whole discussion over there in the Talmud about this particular point. So you're right, it wasn't only Yosef's, just this was clearly indicated at this point because that was part of the Exodus which Yosef actually requested before he died to actually come out.
Thank you.
Yosef made them swear that they will do it. It's not just a request.
It was exactly. It was a vital part of the Exodus, and there was a whole discussion exactly how they found it. Some people say it was Serach bat Asher who got the blessing from Yaakov Avinu to live a long life because she actually gave over the message that Yosef is still alive, and some say so she knew the whereabouts of the Aron. Some say that Moshe Rabbeinu had to use his Kabbalistic powers, if you want, use the name of God to put it into the Nile. Again, these are all midrashim. but we are going with Pshat today. Says the pasuk. Okay, and the very end of the parasha, which we left off, was they again complained about the water. This time, God actually tells him to hit the rock. They are at a lower level, not like what we find later on towards the end of Moshe's life. And then finally, as a result of their lack of faith, they didn't rely on God. Then Amalek comes, and that's the famous story which we always read just prior to Purim to remind ourselves of what Amalek did to us. You can imagine the state of affairs in the world, what the world felt about the Jews or about the Hebrews. What did it feel like? Everyone's coming out, and there's these 10 plagues, and suddenly Pharaoh, one of the greatest tyrants, if you want, but one of the greatest emperors in the entire world, sends out all the Jews that just get out of here, and they're going out laden with gold and silver. You can imagine what the media sounded like at the time. You know, don't touch these guys. These guys are impenetrable, and these are protected by God himself. All the more so when Kriyat Yam Suf happens, they go through the entire sea splits. You can imagine what sort of sensation it caused. In fact, is it Rashi, I think, that actually quotes that part of the miracle, not many people know this, of Yam Suf was that all waters in the world split. Somebody was having a bath in Saudi Arabia, the water split. So that means there was instant news. You know, if you think Facebook or Instagram and WhatsApp are the first people to have sensational media, revelations in a split second. It happened a long time ago at Kriyat Yam Suf when the sea split and all water split. In fact, Rashi says, "Vayishma Yitro." I think it's Rashi that says this, that Yitro heard. How did he hear? He heard, one of the things he heard was Kriyat Yam Suf, because, and the pasuk says, "Ma ra'a Yitro." What did Yitro see? He saw the splitting of the sea, because he was in where was he?
Midian.
Midian.
The Midian.
He was in Midian,
Yeah.
nowhere near Kriyat Yam Suf, and he heard about it because he saw there was some crazy thing happen. So people started asking around until they hear about this great revelation which happened, which actually, as a result of Kriyat Yam Suf, they finally, Vayaminu ba'Hashem u'Moshe Avdo, they finally had this newfound faith, which they didn't have after the 10 plagues, interestingly enough. This newfound faith at Kriyat Yam Suf, which kind of breaks them out into song, and that is really the end of that period. But Amalek, what they did was, they broke this sensation. Everybody in the world was like scared to, don't start with the Jews, because they've got it. They've got miracles happening to them. Don't diss with them. And Amalek came and wham. And you know what? These Jews are not untouchable. I'm going to get them. I'm going to kill them. They all got wiped out. Doesn't matter. And that's really what happened, which is essentially one of the reasons why, until today, there is the concept of wiping out the memory of Amalek, not only from a physical perspective, but also what Amalek did in terms of, breaking this level of connection to people appreciating God's godliness in this world, and that was kind of broken. Grace.
Rabbi, the splitting of the Reed Sea, we imagine it as one split, but was it not sort of 12 lanes?
Yeah, so there's much discussion about the splitting of the sea. There's many medrashim which talk about that. I think Shlomo actually was the one that gave a elaborate description last year, exactly what it looked like. Some say it was actually like a rainbow. So it actually came out on the same side which they actually went from. That's a whole discussion. There's many, there's much talk exactly what happened, and many incredible miracles. But there was this concept of the Jewish people going in 12 lanes. Every shevet had their run, if you want. And that run was, that's what they say, that there's no one way to find God. There's no one approach to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You can be Ashkenazi, you can be Sephardi, you can be Hasidish, you can be whatever you want. There's many different paths to God. And that's, Chatam Sofer talks about the different approaches to God. But that's what's beautiful, that every person, they all had, as long as you're heading to one direction, you're good to go. How you get there? Every person has his own unique perspective. So that pretty much finishes the parasha with the issue of Amalek. Okay, so we're going to go into a little bit to try and figure out what's going on in the parasha, and we are beginning the beginning of the pasuk, Perek Yud Gimel, chapter 13, pasuk Yud Zayin. If you have a chumash in front of you, pasuk 17. Vahi b'shalach paro et ha'am. So Pharaoh sends the people. It happened when Pharaoh sent the people. V'lo nacham Elohim derech eretz Pelishtim ki karovu. And God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, because it was near. Ki amar Elohim, for God said, Pen yinachem ha'am, perhaps the people will reconsider bir'otam milchama, when they see a war, v'shavu mitzrayma, and they will return to Egypt.
Right?
Yeah. One more pasuk. One more pasuk. Vayasev Elohim et ha'am derech hamidbar Yam Suf, and God took the people around towards the way of the wilderness and the sea of reeds. V'chamoshim alu bnei Israel meretz Mitzrayim, and the children of Israel armed when they went up from Egypt. Okay, Dan, yes.
Just the comment, what you read, and Amar Elohim, Ki Amar Elohim, and God said. I mean, was he conversing with?
Very good question. I was actually just thinking of that when I just read it now. What is this? Ki and God said. I mean, what is that exactly? Good question. I don't know the answer to that. You want to suggest something?
Publish someone, because lest the people repent. I mean, so is there another being that's being discussed, or he's discussing this, or this himself, or interesting wording?
Very interesting one. Good question. I don't know the answer. Very good question. We have to do some research.
Sorry.
No, good question. It's worth a good question. Just
wanted to say
another question. Yeah, Shlomo.
That chamushim doesn't mean armed.
We're not there yet. We'll get there.
Okay.
But the
We're
verb,
not there yet, and Rashi will argue with you. Don't worry.
the verb nacham is not really the right verb to use here.
What should it use? What does nacham mean?
Nacham is nechama. There's no connection to he's basically afraid that they will regret, that they will rethink, you know.
Okay, so Rashi is bothered by your point, and Rashi immediately jumps in. He says, "V'lo nahagam, kamo lech necha et ha'am, pitlachecha ve'hitalechecha tamche otecha," which is, "I will lead you. Go lead the people." Okay, so Rashi already quotes another pasuk which has a similar type of wording. But Rashi is clearly bothered by the choice of the. So the pasuk. I just also mentioned one other interesting idea, that another question I just saw. We're just talking about the greatest revelation ever. You know, they're coming out with 2 or 3 million people out of Egypt, and you're talking about when Pharaoh sent out the Jews. When God took out the Jews of Egypt with such miraculous miracles, and he decided to go this way instead of that way, as we'll see in a minute. Interesting. We give the credit to Paro when it was, we all know exactly how much Paro was involved in this story when God hardened his heart and took away his free will, what we discussed last week a little bit. So that's just a point to ponder. Just a quick understanding of what exactly does the map look like.
That the what?
Sorry?
What does what look like?
The map.
Oh, the map. Okay.
Right, I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the Mediterranean. You got over here Egypt. The Jews, last week's parasha, they left Ramses. Not sure, I suppose modern day Cairo over here. They went to Sukkot, and this is Goshen, where the Jews were originally encamped, or when they came to Egypt. And now you would think, okay, so first of all, where are they headed? Anyone know?
Well, they're headed east of the Negev.
What do you mean?
What is their final destination?
Israel.
Israel.
Eretz Israel.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Eretz Canaan.
Eric, the land that Abraham was given.
Okay, seemingly, most likely. I just got one problem with that. I was just bothered with today, and actually found 2 people that talk about this. The Seforno, one of the early Rishonim, medieval commentators, and the Chazon Ish, who was the 21st century Chacham who lived in Bnei Brak, passed away about 50 years ago. And they point out the following. If you look at the Pasuk, we pointed out 2 or 3 weeks ago, do you remember we said by the burning bush? Do you remember we spoke about the burning bush? Moshe gets his original revelation at the burning bush.
They're going to Har Sinai.
Oh, where was the burning bush, we said? At Har Sinai. God says to them that the whole point where you're coming out of Egypt is because Ta'avdun et Elohim al ha'har hazeh. On this very mountain that you're standing on, you will actually, or they are coming out in order to receive the Torah at Sinai. The Sforno asks, Chazon Ish and others, we're not heading to Egypt, we're heading to Sinai. Let's go back to the map. So what's going on over here? Sinai's over here. Midbar Sinai. So you're going from here to here. This is not about going this way to Israel. Jordan over here. Israel's over here. It's along the Gazan border today. We're not talking about going this way. We're talking about going down.
But there was a reason. There was a logistic reason, right? Because of the Plishtim.
Yeah, but
Right, that's the question. The logistic reason doesn't make sense in this context if you're trying to get down here anyway.
Yeah, the Philistines are in north.
Plishtim over here, okay?
That's correct.
It's along the Mediterranean coast to get to Israel. That makes sense. If you're talking simply that God takes them on a roundabout route, if you look at the yellow line over here, this is the route they took. Here's over here. They go over here. Here's where they cross the Yam Suf. They go down. Here's Har Sinai. They're here for about a year. They go around. They go over here. Go all the way up, and they eventually end up in Israel. But logistically, again, this is not about going from Ramses to Israel. We're talking about going from Ramses to Har Sinai. So what's this whole pasuk telling us? God had to take them on this whole roundabout route because of the fear of the attack of war with the Philistines. This is not the issue over here. We're trying to get to Sinai anyway.
yeah,
Is everyone agreeing with me, or?
yeah, it's a good point.
But
Okay.
weren't there other villages, other empires, if you will, small empires that were also powerful, and they had to avoid them as well?
But the pasuk clearly states the reason is because of the Philistines. So
Okay.
again, if we're talking about going to Israel, which is the normal understanding, you're right, and the Rashbam and others actually say that, then it makes sense. The reason why Hashem had to take them on a roundabout circular route is not because of Har Sinai, but simply because he wanted to avoid that Philistines route. But if you're saying they're heading to Har Sinai anyway, then what's the roundabout route? Yes, Eyal.
Where's the point of the crossing on the map? The Kriyat Yam Suf. Which point is it?
Yeah, Kriyat Yam Suf was over here by Baal Tzfon.
Wow,
This big idol.
that's
Which is very interesting because they didn't even have to cross the Yam Suf either, right? Originally, when we talk about the most simple route, I mean, nowadays you have the Suez Canal over here, so which is man-made, right?
Yeah.
But essentially, they could have just crossed over here, have no need for any nisim and all that. But essentially, this was all part of the divine plan, leading them towards getting the Egyptians to run after them, and then they'll be taken up by sea, and then they'll continue on the journey. So both the Sforno and Chazon Ish have this problem. Ron?
Yeah, so of course we have the advantage of hindsight. And with that, I think that the circuitous route, the roundabout route, also gave us a lot of opportunity to have a lot of experiences that we would need to have. We would have a lot of temptations, a lot of troubles. We're a very troublesome people and troubled people with a lot of protests, a lot of uprisings, a lot of disagreements, a lot of difficulties, which with God's help we overcame, and with the help of our leadership. And we had so many formative experiences that turned out to be essential for developing our nation community later on. So without that,
I
it would have
agree
been a
with you,
totally
but
different trajectory.
I agree with you, and 100%. And clearly, it was all part of God's divine plan. The question is, the pasuk states over here a very specific reason why God takes us on this roundabout route.
That's why I said with hindsight rather than with looking
right,
from
right.
this
For
particular
sure.
vantage point.
100%. 100%.
The pasuk doesn't explain it, because you can go down a bit. If you look at the map, you can just go, a bit.
No, Ross saying there were so many incredible experiences which we had to experience through that journey that in hindsight we learned. We stopped in 42 places, right? Pasuk in we have the whole Parshat Mas'eh, which tells us about the 42 Masaot, the 42 journeys which they had, which they stopped and started. The Chazon Ish has a very interesting answer. By the way, I should mention, I actually Googled this to see exactly how it would work. If you Ron, talking about hindsight and modern day GPS and all that, but how long is it from Egypt, from Cairo to Jerusalem? So apparently it's somewhere along the lines like 730 kilometers. You can Google it. I tried to do a walk on Google Maps. They didn't allow me. But the Ibn Ezra says that V'yadua ki Mitzrayim ad Yerushalayim, from Egypt to Jerusalem, derech Perishtim, through the land of the Philistines, eino merchak rav, is not a great journey. Hu kmo mahalach asarei yamim b'derech hayshara, which takes approximately 10 days on a straight route. So I mean, you'll see soon. We talk about going the day and the night. We have to discuss that really, but that's another subject, whether they were going consistently. Gavi, you have the route?
Yeah. So Google Maps says it takes 6 days, 4 hours.
Fantastic.
To walk it.
Is that walking continuously? I think
730 kilometers in 6 days.
So apparently a person can walk up to 100 kilometers a day, approximately.
I walked 30 kilometers and I was exhausted, and that's when I was younger.
That's really pushing it.
So I'm not sure exactly,
And carrying weight.
Yeah, you got to carry divisions and all that. Yeah, that's really hard.
Sam, where I come from, you can do 100 kilometers overnight.
The land is not flat. What are you talking about?
Okay, so we can argue about this, but the truth is, it definitely didn't.
It depends if you're Android or iPhone, maybe.
But interesting, the Ibn Ezra says it takes about 10 days. I don't know how he knew, from he didn't have a GPS, right? So he managed to work it out. But anyway, he actually said something very interesting, because the fact is they took donkeys out, they take food out, and the normal journey should have taken, let's say 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it was. But it was a straightforward journey to go from Egypt to Israel. But then they had this kind of roundabout circular route, which kind of took them off course. But it doesn't answer our question.
Kilometers a day. Wow, that's amazing. Did they have airplanes? How was this going? Flying pigs.
How many kilometers? How many a day?
I don't know. I'm saying, according to Google, he says,
well,
walk 100 kilometers a day. I don't know. I don't think
and animals. Come on, Rabbi, you've got the animals that they had, the children they've got. How can you possibly consider?
Oh, for sure. I'm not saying that's exactly what would have happened. I'm telling you how realistic it is when we talk about how long it is distance from Egypt to Jerusalem.
Okay.
It wouldn't take more than a couple of weeks, perhaps even a couple of months. Certainly not 40 years. Right?
There's a reason for the 40 years.
I understand, but
because they couldn't walk the distance.
But I really like what I'm pointing out from the Ibn Ezra is, what he says is the mere fact that they took out, the matzot, which they cooked, it baked on the way out, and probably enough food or whatever it is to be able to last the journey. If the journey is going to take 6 months, they're going through the desert, for goodness sake, right? To take however much you want to take, but it's not going to last. So from a practical perspective, there was this, they were able to get from Egypt to their final destination. Sforno and others actually say that God actually wanted them to be able to go on this circular route, to be able to train them in this concept of faith, of bitachon, that we're going through the wilderness with 3 million people. However much food you have, it's not going to last. And you have to rely on God. And this is what God is consistently training them. And the whole thing with the man, the whole thing with the water, all these things where God's saying, guys, buckle up, rely on me, and it'll be okay. Okay, but I just want to point out, Chazon Ish has a very interesting approach, which I've never seen before. And this is in your merit, that I have the merit to look this up. And that is, says the Chazon Ish, that actually the original plan was to go to Har Sinai. Sorry, the original plan was, says the Chazon Ish, Beit Chidush, that the Torah would have been given in Eretz Yisrael. However, because of this issue with the Plishtim, which we'll see in a minute in Rashi, why it was an issue, therefore God had to reconfigure a new route, and that's why it had to go there, and eventually it came to Har Sinai. I suppose you're going to have to say, Tavdun ta Elohim al Har Hazeh, is God saying his prophecy that you know where the end story is going to be? It's going to be Har Sinai. But not because that was the original divine plan. Interesting. I thought it was an interesting approach. Nice to point it out.
Question. How could we think that God really wanted it to be in Eretz Yisrael rather than Har Sinai? I mean, God could have rearranged the Plishtim as well.
That's
You
right.
know, I mean, if
That's a
God
very
has
good
the
question.
power to do any of these things, so I can't accept belief in the idea that it worked out in some way that God didn't want it to work out.
Yeah, the truth is they also asked that question. I mean, if God had problems with the Plishtim and he was worried about that, so just get them out of the way. It's clearly not a problem for God to bump people out of the way. What's the big deal? I know, reroute the whole system.
Because it wasn't just about being victorious or not over another nation. It was also the emotional and mental psyche of people who are just,
Slavery.
days away or short or steps away from what once was slavery, that whole mentality. So
Exactly.
there's much more into this journey that awaits them than merely avoiding or encountering Amalek or Plishtim. It's more about the becoming, the journey that needs to take place in order to become and in order to be deserving of what awaits them.
But isn't there more that God had to show the people that they weren't prepared? In fact, they weren't prepared, even though they came out of Egypt. They weren't prepared. In fact, they hit the Eretz Yisrael. The first commandment, when it came to the alien nation, that he told them, go and strike this nation, they will fall under your sword. And they were too scared. They refused. And because of that, that's the reason that then said, okay, you're not going to make it. This generation will disappear. In fact, 2 generations will disappear, and your children are the ones that are going to be capable because the slavery will be behind them to go ahead. So they had, in other words, the people themselves had to be shown that they weren't the ones that could do it. They just weren't capable.
It's true. And Malbim and Sforno, actually a little bit later, we'll see in the next pasuk, actually points out there was, like Ellen said, this and Dan, the slave mentality. Psychologically, they had this slave mentality, which they could not cope with. And as a result, they were in this space which they couldn't get rid of. And therefore, at any sign of any sort of uprising or any sign of battle or war, this is going to be the end. Therefore, says the pasuk, let's continue back in the pasuk, God takes them around, derech eretz Pelishtim, peninachem ha'am birotam milchama. Just in case, perhaps the people will reconsider when they see a war and they return to Egypt. I'm rather prepare to count down back to the Egyptians than to start going into a war and start rising up. I can't deal with that. So that's where they were holding. Sforno says the same point a little bit later on. Vachamoshim, they came out fortified. Says Sforno, very interesting wording. I also just saw before. Says Sforno, they went out with swords.
Yeah, they were armed.
Vachamoshim, not like Shlomo. כי עם כל כלי זינם לא היה להם אומץ לב להילחם במצרים ולהימלט, כי לא ניסו באלה. He said, but there was this, they didn't have the experience in war. They just came out of 210, 400 years, 430 years, whatever breakdown calculation you want to work out. We spoke about it briefly last week. Again, the point is they didn't have that to go and take on anyone. God says, I'm going to take you a roundabout circular route to make sure you don't even have that problem. Let's read one Rashi before Shlomo comes and jumps at me. Ki karov hu, says Rashi, v'noch lashuv oto derech Mitzrayim. Because it's just easy to go back to Egypt. You go through the Philistine, the land of the Philistines, they can very easily go back. Interesting, Rashi says, Umedrash Agada yesh harbe. There's many Medrash Agadic to explain this. Rashi doesn't often do this. If Rashi's bringing in Medrash Agada, he's bringing it for a reason. Yet Rashi says there's many different explanations from a Medrash perspective, but he doesn't. Don't say that either. If you're not bringing it because it's not pshat, we said Rashi is going with pshat, simple understanding of the text. So why is Rashi saying? And by the way, P.S. There's lots of medrashic explanations on this. So there's explanations on this point of Rashi to say there's a bit of a strange. The wording is a little bit strange because derech is used can be used in a masculine or feminine form. And Rashi has some problems with the way the pasuk is worded. Ki karov hu. And derech is really supposed to be feminine, and therefore, and the rest of the pasuk is masculine. Rashi has problems with that. Says Rashi, I can tell you there is medrashic explanations for that, but I'm not going to delve into it because we like to deal with pshat. We like to understand the simple meaning of the text. The next Rashi is what we want to go to. Kikarov birotam milchama, when they see a war. Says Rashi, what do you mean when they see a war? Kagon milchemet vayer ha'meleki b'kanani. Pasuk shelach, parashat shelach. Shelach lecha. What happens? They have the whole story with the spies, and they want to go and fight and all sorts. And then suddenly the Canaanites and the Amalekites descended, and they start fighting. Im halchut derech yashar hayu chozrin. If they would have gone straight and direct route to Egypt, from Egypt, they would have quickly run back. Umayim shikifam derech meukam, says Rashi. And now, if when he took them roundabout by a circular route, amru nitna rosh v'nashuv mitzrayim, what happened? At the Meraglim, at the time of the spies, when they start getting nervous, they say, "Oh no, this Eretz Israel is a crazy place, and it's got this, big fruits, and people are dying, and all sorts. Let's just go back. Let's just go back to Egypt." Says Rashi, if they're already prepared to say that once they've gone on this whole, roundabout route, all the more so, had he taken them by a straight one, all the more so would have they wanted to return to Egypt, because that was the quickest and most direct route. Yaakov Kamenetsky, in his Sefer Brikat Peretz, says something very beautiful. He said, what does that tell us about our nisyonot, about challenges that we face? When we face a challenge, then a person shouldn't put himself in that challenge, first of all, in the first place. But even if a person is in that challenge, a person should try and distance themselves from that challenging situation to be able to make sure that a person doesn't fall. For example, a person does an avera. A person commits a sin for whatever it is. If a person, let's talk about Lashon Hara, because Lashon Hara is, nobody feels bad or nobody gets embarrassed. Right? We all speak Lashon Hara. Well, I can speak for myself, unfortunately. People gossip. That's how it is, right? That's how people. The Gemara says everyone falls in that sin, in that category. And you can go into a situation where you see everyone's gossiping. I've got a really hot piece of information. Or you can make sure to distance yourself that you don't fall into that trap. Says the pasuk, God didn't want them to face a situation, and once you're in it, it's almost too late. So make sure you don't put yourself into the situation in the first place and avoid it, so that you're making sure you're not confronting the fact when it's so hard to fall in. Says the Birkat Peretz, that is exactly the same point over here. God didn't want them to have this situation where they have this slave mentality, they're not sure how to handle things. They suddenly see swords, they get all nervous, and they're going to run back. So you know what? Let's take them on a roundabout route, as far away as possible, to make sure that it won't make it easy for them. If you don't make your situation easy, then at least it's an additional barrier before you break that. So coming back to your question, yes.
No, we doing all this analysis of the text and everything and trying to figure out things, but at the bottom line, there is a divine plan that is destined to be followed. So number one, Moshe tells Paro, let us go 3 days and we'll sacrifice to our God. And it's the truth. He didn't say we're not coming back. He said, let us go for 3 days. So I think God wants to make sure that the Egyptians will chase them and they will go through the sea, and all the gold and silver that the Egyptians brought with them, in the end of the day, ended up in the Jews' hand, or the Bnei Israel hand, after what we call Bizat Hayam, which
Correct.
Bizat Hayam was greater than Bizat Mitzrayim.
Correct.
But if he will just go straight to where he wants to cross them, get them to cross, it will be too easy. The Egyptian will not pick on it. Nothing will happen the way he planned. That's number one. Number two, we keep using the term slave mentality. If we just, like you mentioned earlier, it's Holocaust Remembrance Day. If we just think about the Jews in the camps, you can't fight. You're not in the spirit. You don't have the energy. You are, like you say, you're a victim. And when you're a victim, you can't fight. So I think this whole thing, when you mentioned earlier that they were not impressed by the 10 plagues, it puzzles you, it puzzles all of us, but they are still slaves. So yeah, a big thing, big disaster happened to the Egyptian 10 times over. Even with the Choshech, they were not too impressed. But now when they're out of the victim situation, they are walking towards the freedom. Now they can appreciate something that happened. If they would be still slave and you split the sea, maybe we'll just shrug and say, okay, the sea, there was a high tide, low tide, whatever people say. But I think all in all, we have to appreciate that there was a plan here, that all God is trying to do is get the Jews to be part of it. So they're walking around and avoiding the Philistine and going from that way and that way. It's a plan. It was not
also,
just.
You know, I agree with what you're saying. Also, I think it's important to understand this idea of how they were learning to live their lives over 400 years. That it isn't one day you wake up and all of a sudden, it's a eureka moment, right? Where you realize this is the way it is. It seems like they were being weaned from a situation which they knew intimately into this idea of trusting in God. And ultimately, it was 2 steps forward and 1 step back. They kept failing. As a matter of fact, so much they got to the borders of Eretz Israel and then decided, this generation is not going to work. Go take a hike. Well, we need a new generation. It's slow. It's like 1 step forward and 10 steps back, it seems, you know. It's a slow process. How do you get people to trust in God, you know? I mean,
yeah, 100%. Look, the truth is, I think,
and God knew it too. I mean, he knew all of this stuff, you know.
I want to challenge this.
Wait, can I ask you a question? The truth is, it'd be like what Ron was saying before, but I think we can ask the question again. Then, you know, the question which we asked from this foreigner before, and I don't know the answer to this. I'm saying maybe you'll help me out. We're talking about Kriyat Yam Suf. We're talking about the greatest revelation of all, right? It's going to, you know, take over anything they've ever seen before. We needed to have Bizat Hayam. We need to have the treasures which the Jewish people picked up. We spoke about last week, the issue with Avraham Avinu in begging them to take out the treasure from Egypt. And we asked, why Avraham Avinu? That was part of the promise. And the answer was because the final real Bizah was going to be a Bizat Hayam. The real treasure was going to be at the Yam Suf. So part of the divine plan was clearly the Yam Suf. And it's so much so that the you know, where they actually finally got it was at Yam Suf. So until they didn't get that bit, it was clearly not finalize the Exodus. So why is the Torah telling us all these interesting explanations? Derech Eretz Pelishtim, because God had a divine plan to go to Kiryat Yamsuf. What's all this business about, guys? Anyone got an answer? Forget about Har Sinai and Eretz Yisrael.
Very
God
problematic.
had a plan which we had to get to.
It's
Kiryat
trust.
Yamsuf.
Trust.
Okay, yeah.
I think that this sentence is driving us crazy because it's not belonging. It's not doesn't belong here. You don't need to give a reason why you're doing your plan. Or maybe it's Moshe telling them that.
No, this is a pasuk. Ki amar Elohim.
Yeah,
Rabbi,
yeah. In fact, God tells Moses to turn around to get down to the position where he's going to present the idea of the Yom Suf. So, but aren't we talking about actually trying to develop this relationship with God? Isn't that what it's all about?
Right.
You have to be at a level where you can to develop that trust. You have to have that level of
That's the
understanding,
idea.
and you have to have that
We
level.
mentioned to go through the
That's the
wilderness.
name of the game.
You
For
you
sure.
have to have that level to be able to have that relationship. When you're coming out from a place of slavery, and in fact, when it says, what are the commandments for a slave? Really, it's just a belief, you don't have to carry any of the commandments out as a slave. And so there's that mentality that they've got to overcome, which is after 400 years. And now we're talking about children that are born, unlike the Holocaust. Okay, people knew what Judaism was before, even though they were enslaved by the Nazis. They understood what they came from before, so that strength was always there. Even physically, it was very difficult. But in this situation, even the children were born slaves. They knew nothing else. So therefore, it's a lot more difficult for those families to really appreciate or understand what they're trying to develop in that relationship.
100%. I think it's
I agree with everything there, except I think that all the mothers of all these children over 400 years sang songs and whispered things into their ears. I think there was a sense of the specialness of this people.
yes. Look, I think it's actually really important when we talk about the parasha, where even really the whole experience in the midbar, how every little thing the Jews are complaining. There's no water, bang, and everybody starts crying, and they whoa, relax, make a miracle, boom, they give you water. Next, a few days later, boom, there's no food, relax, what's the big deal? We'll give you food thing. And then, there's no practical meat. What's the matter with you guys? You just came out of Egypt, you saw 10 miracles, you saw Kriyat Yam Suf, what's the matter with you? But again, if you get into the mindset of the Jewish people, they won't get into the high level of bitachon, of faith, where they can completely rely on God.
Yeah.
Be able to say, don't worry about it, we're good.
That's the
Will
problem.
that teach us on a day-to-day basis? It's a constant struggle, but we have to throw ourselves in, whether it's parnasah, whether it's health. Sometimes we think to ourselves, we're in charge. God will tell us, you're not in charge, and I'll show you you're not in charge. But that's exactly what these lessons are for us.
And to bring it to today, though, Rabbi, have we changed?
It's a constant work. This is our challenge.
I mean, that is the case. It's a constant work. We haven't really, when you think about it, we haven't really changed. The one thing that we keep seeing our enemies, because we're not a uniform people. We are divided and fought and divided in our processes. And
yep, Ron mentioned before, we're stiff-necked people.
Rabbi,
People.
sorry, we're almost out of time,
Yes.
and we still have to have Meyer tell us how we got it all wrong.
Yes. I was waiting 1 second. Before Meyer, Grace wanted to say something.
no, to me, it seems that if we took the shortcut, we wouldn't have been ready to
Right.
get into Israel.
exactly.
Right.
We needed,
I think everyone's saying the same
like
thing.
everybody has said, all the experience, whether it's the gaining the faith and everything, to be ready to appreciate where we're going to end up. It's unfortunately like prisoners, they're free, and once they get free, they don't know what to do with themselves because.
So my question is stronger. Why does the pasuk have to give us this whole thing about Pelishtim and all sorts? They're going to see the war. There's a divine plan, and we have to get through something. End of story.
But the divine plan is not a fixated exact thing. It's got to
Okay,
have
one thing was clear was Kriyat Yam Suf, that was clear. That had to happen.
Okay, and it didn't work 100%. So there's got to be modification to it. I mean, the plan, you're right, there's a plan, but it's going to take time. It's going to take changes. All right. And in fact, 2 generations.
But you know,
I'm gonna stop. I just want to say
It's
one
a
thing that I
partnership.
told
The
Shlomo.
whole thing is always a partnership, all of
Right.
it. The whole history of the Jewish people is a partnership between the people and God, period. That's what it's about.
We're at 8 o'clock, and I just want to say one more, Rashi, if you'll excuse me. It's just related to what we spoke about last week, and then Meir will give us his official account. Vachamushim, Shlomo challenged the Pasuk Yudchet, Pasuk 18. Shlomo challenged the translation. Vachamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. So Shlomo, what's your suggestion? I translated, and they came out armed.
They have everything they needed, but they did not have arms.
What does
Because-
translation of Vachamushim mean, please?
Chamushim usually mean armed,
Okay, so what's the problem with that?
but how did slave get arms leaving Egypt?
The same way they
And
got gold.
when they were with their back to the sea and the Egyptian army is facing them, they could say, okay, we're going to fight them, but they had no arms. They had enough.
No,
they
that
had
was
enough
no. 1 second.
supplies.
If that's your whole issue, then I'll tell you, how do slaves come out with donkeys laid with gold and silver?
Exactly. How did that happen?
Not a question. But that's really the sfornosh we pointed out before, that the slave mentality didn't allow them to fight with the swords that they had. They had the swords, but they couldn't fight. But I just want to point out one Rashi. Vachamushim. Says Rashi, En chamushim ela mezuyanim. The word chamushim in this context means armed. But Rashi carries on the end of the Rashi. Davar acher, he gives a separate explanation. Pasuk 18, right at the end. Echad mechamisha yatzu. We mentioned this last week. 1 out of 5 Israelites departed from Egypt. Ve'arba'a chalakim metu b'shloshet yemei afela. And 4/5 died in Egypt during the 3 days of darkness. I know Meir had an issue with this last week, but that's what Rashi says. Vachamushim, the word is like chomesh.
1 out of 5. Yeah.
Only 1/5 of Klal Yisrael came out of Egypt. Can you imagine?
I wanted
Rabbi,
I want to wait
there is
before
a-
your question. I want to say one point.
on the truck. Let me finish.
Yeah, allow me 1 second. Vachamushim echad michamisha. I'll tell you something for Holocaust Remembrance Days for Sam. It says, Rashi says later on, we say Az Yashir Moshe, right? Az Yashir Moshe. Who can translate? Az Yashir Moshe.
then it could be future or could be past, but it's future.
Future, Az.
Az Yashir
No,
Moshe.
Az Yashir Moshe.
We will sing.
He will sing. What do you mean he will sing? He sang then.
Oh, he sang.
בתחיית המתים, בתחיית המתים.
Hey, you're jumping. I want to know the pasuk.
No, you
Az Yashir
Az
Moshe.
Yashir
Az,
Moshe.
he, past tense, present tense, future tense.
no, grammar-wise, it's fine.
No, Az, it should be Az Shar Moshe. That's what it should be.
נכון.
Then Moshe sang. So Shlomo correctly said, it didn't say Az Yashir, then Moshe will sing. So Rashi already obviously is bothered by it. Rashi says simple understanding is that his heart kind of gave way to this overwhelming experience of, I just got to sing, and then the thing came forth. Az Yashir, it kind of let way into that explosion of song. But then Rashi quotes a very famous Gemara, the Talmud, that this is the source for Techiyat Hamitim, for the resurrection of the dead. Someone just pointed out. Everybody asks, what's the source? This is going to be, at this point, the source of the resurrection of the dead? I had a beautiful idea once. The Holocaust survivors came once to one of the rabbis, the Belzer Rav, and they said to him, what, we have nothing left. We're broken people. How are we supposed to move on? And he said it was Pashat Bashach when they came to him. He said, Nifik's Parashah. And he asked him this question. It says, Az Yashir, it should be Az Shar. And Rashi says, it actually refers to Tchiyat HaMetim, the resurrection of the dead. So he said, what's going on? He said, very simple. There was a problem over here. These people were slaves. These people were broken. Rashi just said 4/5 of the Jewish people had died. Think about what happened. Not only, okay, there was great miracles, but The brothers, the sisters, the cousins, the auntie, everyone had died. And they're so depressed, they're so broken. And suddenly they burst out into song. What's going on? Says the rabbi, he said, you know why? From here we see the resurrection of the dead. Why? Because there must have been an element which they were holding on to, which allowed them to sing. A person can only sing when a person's happy. That state of elation was because they knew there was hope. Because at the end, there's going to be Tchiat HaMetim. There's going to be Yemot HaMashiach. There's going to be hope for a complete change. He told the people, he said, you hang on to hope, you can get out of that. I thought it was a very appropriate message. You know, when a person goes through hardships, if you hold on to hope that there's going to be an end, Bezrat Hashem, there'll be light at the end of the tunnel, then a person can get through whatever challenge there is. Okay.
Can I make 2 comments, Rabbi?
Sure.
One comment is that, after the Holocaust, 1 out of 5 Jews survived. 20% of the Jews in Europe, 80% were basically, died or massacred.
33% of the Jews in the Holocaust. 33%. We lost 6 million of the 18 million.
Yeah, and we haven't got it back yet, right?
No, we haven't got it back. We're 14, we're 15.
The comment is, I want to again refer to Meyer, because I think that what you just told us is just, there are some stories or some things that are being almost forced to be explained that don't make sense. How from these songs, Tchiat HaMetim, almost can say whatever you want to say, and people just say, oh, okay, but I don't see any connection,
Right.
And that's what Meyer says, when you read the where is it coming from, is it just some rabbis that...
So it's a very good question. It's a very fair question, put it that way. It's, first of all, I'll point out that Rashi has a simple explanation, right? Rashi always says similar explanations. When Rashi has additional problems with the simple explanation, Rashi goes on to the midrashic terms and explanations. Rashi's quoting a piece of the Talmud, and there is certain breakdowns of transmissions of how we got the Torah, brought down the Talmud, right? So not everything is, it's not just a rabbi woke up one morning, he said, hey, guys, how about we connect? Az Yashir sounds about right. Tchiat HaMetim. Guys, and if you don't believe it, you're kofer b'chol Torah kula, you're a heretic, and you're out. It's not quite how it works. I understand the breakdown, but you're right. There are many midrashim which you think to yourself, golly, where did this one from, right? And we've discussed this many a time about how midrashim, there's different ways to take midrashim. Not every midrash has to be taken out of, the context is not necessarily a literal meaning always. We mention often the Rambam, that if you believe all midrashim, you're a fool. If you don't believe any, you're also a fool. You have to know when to take, when not to take. So that's pretty much the overall experience.
Sometimes when I hear someone talk with a great deal of confidence about a literal interpretation of Tchiat HaMetim, the first question I want to ask them is, in their will, did they leave all their money to themselves?
He just doesn't know how long he'll be there. That's the problem. That's why. The famous story with Rabbi Akiva Eiger, I think it was. There was a certain miser that he died. And the Chevra Kedisha made a thing that when this guy dies, he's not going to let anyone. They're not going to let anyone bury him because this guy didn't give a penny to tzedakah his whole life. So they made a pact that all the Chevra Kedisha are not going to bury him until they give some money to tzedakah. So the sons of the deceased go to the rabbi, Akiva Eiger at the time, I think it was, and he said, Rabbi, this is extortion, for goodness sake. You can't tell us what to do. You got to bury the guy. So he turned around to me and said, you don't understand. He said, simple burial. Everybody believes that there's going to be Tchiat HaMetim. But someone like him, he's not going to get that. So he's going to be a long time. So this piece of land, which they're leasing to him, is a long-term plan. So it's going to cost a lot of money. The question is how long we're going to be there. No, Bezrat Hashem. Bekarov mamash, Bezrat Hashem. Okay, what's up here?
What is
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Quick question, Mayor, quick question.
We didn't have any comments from you today.
Laila Tov v'Chag
Well,
Sameach.
thank you, Rabbi. I didn't want to dispute too much, so I actually agreed with most of the stuff you said. Most of it.
Something's wrong today.
Mayor, are you meeting tomorrow? Is there a
Tomorrow?
thing tomorrow morning? Oh, sorry,
Friday morning.
Friday morning?
Yeah, Friday morning, every Friday morning.
Okay, are you sending out the Zoom links or?
Yes.
It's usually the same links all the time, right, Rabbi?
See, Dan. Yes. It goes out it goes out every Thursday in the weekly email.
But isn't the link always the same for all the meetings?
I think so, actually. I think the Friday morning
Yeah.
ones are.
Okay, I will try.
Dan, maybe can you give a presentation this week?
I thought Sam is doing it.
Oh, but he didn't confirm with me.
Oh,
Did he confirm with you?
He said he was going to think about something, but he's not sure. But he didn't confirm. No.
Okay, so he didn't confirm. So Dan, can you give something?
Me?
Yeah.
Not enough. I need more time than just 2 days to get prepared.
Okay, I'll Sam.
Sorry.
Okay, so can you do for next week?
In the future, next week.
Okay.
Okay, next Friday. Next Friday.
And Ron, can you do in 2 weeks? I'll
Sure.
remind you.
Sure. I haven't, I just actually heard from Sam earlier today that it was still going on. I haven't seen a link for Friday mornings. I assumed it
neither have
wasn't
I.
happening.
Neither have I. I was told there was, but I never got a link or an email that say this is the link.
No, on every email with all the times of Shabbat, it's at the top there, Friday morning breakfast. It doesn't go
I
as an
haven't even
additional
seen it.
And breakfast too. I'm coming.
That's virtual breakfast.
Bye-bye.
All right, Laila
Have a
Tov.
good night, everyone.
Okay.
Good night, Robert.
2 weeks. Okay.
That's it. Thank you, Ron.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov. Good to see you, Ron.
And happy date night, or is that
I asked my wife. She
the
wants to go on a date.
appropriate term for
100%. Tu B'Shvat.
okay, good.
Okay, have a good night, Ron.
You too.